Maybe she isn't.
Don't believe so.
Okay, Mel, maybe I'm the only one who has that conflict. So
Well, I know Travis Williams has stepped away from the River Keepers, and I've reached out to them to ask them for to see if they still want to engage with someone else. But I know he's missing this meeting, so I forget where he's moved on to. So
it should be Bob Salinger now. So
yeah,
I don't know if they gave you his contact information.
Yeah, they did. I reached out to Bob, and I presume Travis's emails are being forwarded as well. But yeah, I did reach out to Bob as well and asked him to give me a call.
Great.
Okay, let's see here. Hi, Andrew. I think you're muted there.
Hi, John. Thanks. Yep. Hi, team.
Excellent. I think we'll give it a few more minutes here. We'll give a couple more minutes for people to stream in. I know a few people accepted. Don't see them yet, so. Okay. Okay, well, it looks like it's 5 after. I've sent out a few reminders to people just in case they've read. Oh, there's Kyle. So, but we're now streaming and recording. So, Chair, would you like to get the meeting started, or do you want to wait for a few minutes?
We're good to start. We've got 11 people here, so let's call the meeting to order at 1:05 p.m.
Okay, would you?
Don, will you do a roll call?
Yep, I can do roll call. Go ahead. Councillor Baumgartner.
I'm here, council president, for
Oh, thank you.
quickly.
Thank you for the reminder. My apologies.
No worries.
And Councillor Groner. Not seeing him. Tom Watton. Nope, I just sent him a reminder. Chair Manning.
Present.
Kathy Halicki. Nope. Patrick Hogan.
Here.
Oh, there you are. Let's see, Bailey has resigned. Let's see here. Julie Hernandez is not present that I can see. Kyle Anderson. Oh, thank you. You're muted, by the way, but I see you. I see you on screen. So, Andrew Mason.
I'm here, and I hope to be joined as well by our I'm outgoing executive director for William Hills Trust, and I hope that Kate Brown is on her way in, but I don't know whether she can use the same invitation as mine. I think she'll be joining shortly here.
She should be able to, I believe. So I'll confirm in the meantime. So, John George. Nope. Berta Mansfield.
I'm here.
Thank you. Jim Edwards.
Here.
Bob Schultz. Not seeing him. Jeff Cohn.
I'm here.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff. Josh Carter. Greg Smith. And Travis is not here, and his replacement, Bob, just emailed me and said he can't make it today. So, okay, well, thank you, Chair. We've called the roll. So,
Thank you. So second item is approval of meeting notes from 11/2/2023. I would need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
okay.
Hi.
Okay, I think I just got a note from Kathy Halicki. She's having some technical issues and she's trying to unmute herself. So she'll be here shortly, Mr. Chair. So
Thank you.
okay.
All right, so let's move to item number 3, presentation and discussion of community engagement summary project consultant.
Great, thanks a lot. So I wanted to share the results of our first round, well, our restart of community engagement on the draft vision plan. So we had a community engagement period that included both virtual and in-person touch points with project partners and with the general public. And I wanted to share those results. I had forwarded to John, and John distributed a summary memo that sort of encapsulates, the findings of that community engagement. But I wanted to go through that in a presentation format. And then I'll try and find a few points along the way where we can stop for comments and feedback. And then I did just want to note right up front, thank you, Jeff, for your scrutiny on the summary tables, there was a little bit of confusion in how we were presenting that information, and my apologies for that. We will update those tables to be more reflective and a bit more useful in terms of looking at how those survey results panned out in terms of like what people's choices for land use preferences were in each of those districts. And I'll walk through that new methodology towards the end of the meeting to preserve some time for comments for people that do need to jump off at 2 o'clock. But to say thanks for highlighting that, and we'll get a bit more clarity. But essentially, the summary of results in document and what we'll go through is still pretty accurate. There's a couple of tiny changes to wording that we may have to update to reflect that that change. So I'm going to share my screen with a presentation to walk through our round of community engagement on the draft vision plan. So just as a bit of a refresher, if you like, the Westland Waterfront Master Plan is a restart of previous planning efforts that have happened on the waterfront for, well, I mean, yes, over 40 years, but a specific push on the Westfront on the master planning effort between 2016 and 2019 that informed our draft vision plan and was unfortunately halted by COVID. But we used that information to create a draft vision that we took out to the public between February and the end of May. And so what we're intending to do is to use your feedback, as well as we've got some other exercises working with staff to go through the feedback that we received and develop a final vision plan that we can move forward into this sort of phase 2. And so there will be some level of community engagement on that final vision plan to take it back out to, or at least make it available to the public, so they are able to see how things have changed based on their feedback and provide commentary on that. And then phase 3 of this project will come to like sort of probably early next year, where we actually look at some of the legislative needs of that vision plan and what's needed to put it into policy in the city. So that's kind of a little bit of a snapshot of where we've been and where we're headed in terms of engagement. So just wanted to summarize who we engage. So we broke this down into engaging with partners and with the public in general. So our partners include yourselves, and with some of you, including the property owners and the tribal interests in the area, we did more specific interviews to get more information on those partners' interests in the area. We just had a meeting this week with the Technical Advisory Committee, which includes City of Oregon City, ODOT, and other sort of agency partners in the area. And then staff have also been doing briefings of different neighbourhood associations and community organisations, but also of decision-making bodies throughout that engagement period as well. And then our public outreach included both an online and an in-person components. And those looked, the in-person components included a public open house that a lot of you attended at the library back in February. Staff also conducted tabling events, presentations to civic groups, property owner interviews, and then also decision maker briefings. And then on the virtual side, we had a project website where folks could go on and take a virtual survey. They could also comment directly on the vision plan, a PDF of the vision plan. And they could also email or contact John as the project manager to ask any questions. And we had a few of those, but not too many. And they could also sign up for an interested parties list to get more communications or ongoing communications on the project as we move forward. So just to summarize a couple of key highlights here, you're all part of the working group, which includes 18 different members. There's also 8 members of our technical advisory committee from partner agencies. In terms of how much engagement we had really good visitation of the website, over 3,000 visits since we posted it in January. 11 people left written comments on the draft vision plan, which is not a lot, but we got some good comments out of that. Meanwhile, over 500 people took the online survey. And one of the key stats that we pulled out of that was actually that 64% of people that responded to that survey had not actually engaged in prior planning efforts on the waterfront. So I think that speaks a little bit to, new people coming into the community potentially, but also hopefully that we did a pretty good job of reaching out to a broad cross-section of people and got a lot of people who hadn't previously engaged, particularly during 2016 to 2019, before the pandemic. In-person engagement, we had at least 100 people visit the open house at the library. Staff did 10 presentations at community meetings and 5 different tabling events that reached out to different people. We wanted to summarize what we heard out of our partner engagement and then go into what we heard out of our public engagement. So one of the critical things that that we heard was that, in this area, partnerships are obviously essential. The city owns very little property itself on the waterfront. And so those private property owners and other partner groups in that area have their own planning processes that we will need to obviously coordinate with. And I'm hoping that this community engagement feedback will actually help to inform some of those planning processes for property owners and interests in the area. Another thing that came out of those partnership discussions is, or partner discussions, is that there is definitely significant support for restoring both tribal and public access to the waterfront. So that was sort of a critical message that we heard. We also heard a lot about just the general excitement around being able to unlock the natural assets or the assets of the area, and that this was potentially an opportunity for West Linn to create a regional attraction that could spur some private investment and economic development, but also that there's a really big opportunity to celebrate tribal history and restore Indigenous practices, but also to interpret the industrial heritage and potentially reuse buildings as they change, as potentially they change use, but noting that there is current activity with both electricity generation and an operating paper mill, amongst other things, on the site. When we spoke with partner groups, including yourselves, the example of the Vancouver waterfront was seen as a good comparable for a number of reasons. Former industrial land, mostly not owned by the city, an economic development increase, and also public access to the river. But we definitely heard pretty loudly as well that it is not the only example that we should be using, and it's obviously also very different in terms of topography and other things to the site here in West Linn. And so there was a need to also bring into the vision plan different precedents to show lower intensity development opportunities, as well as opportunities for natural enhancements or wetland restoration, open space, trails and other things. So hopefully the vision plan has done a pretty good job of that. One thing that you are all pretty aware of is that there is definitely a lot of diversity in the waterfront district, or in the waterfront, and each district has a very distinct character and is very different from the others. In historic City Hall, we sort of heard that that's maybe the most logical place for density, but it does obviously have a lot of constraints in terms of traffic, topography and other things. In the Cultural Heritage District, we certainly heard themes around celebrating history, reuse, maintaining critical functionality to those sites. And then in the Ponds District, recognizing that there is natural environment and habitat down in that area, including some wetlands activity, and that lower intensity uses was sort of seen as more preferable in that area. At least that's what we're hearing so far. Topography is obviously an issue on the site, but what that does potentially do is create this sort of two stratas or lowlands where there may need to be lower intensity development, flood resistance, maybe a bit more of a push towards natural and open spaces, and an uplands area where potentially higher intensity land uses could be employed and potentially have access to views of the river and the waterfalls and those sorts of things. So there is some opportunity, but also some constraint created by that topography. Access is a key driver of what happens on this site. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. Maintaining access for ongoing electric power generation, and currently an operating paper mill on the island in particular. And access to the island in general is pretty challenging. So that may dictate a lot of what can happen in the area. Accommodations for multimodal traffic, which is a high interest in, and increased development, particularly in those uplands, is driven somewhat by topography and potentially reconstructing Willamette Falls Drive, and those things are not going to be inexpensive infrastructure projects potentially. And then the last thing that's sort of coming up in terms of access was we heard about the ped bike bridge alignments that ODOT's been exploring, and the opportunities for those, particularly the alignment that's south of the arch bridge, to be a connection between the sort of upland area of the site, potentially onto the tip of the island, and then over to Tumwater Village. There is another alignment north of the arch bridge that's being considered, and I believe that's the one that's also favoured by City of Oregon City. So there's a little bit of difference there between the different sides of the river. A big theme that we heard is access to the river. One of the ways that that can happen is through the current upgrading of the locks. But there are also other opportunities potentially for people to get direct access to the water, but also to be able to, see the falls, see the river, experience the natural sort of beauty of the area. Perhaps before I get into public engagement, I might just pause there and give folks an opportunity to ask any questions or comments at this stage about the stuff presented so far. Okay, I'll move on. So I wanted to go through what we heard through public engagement. How we're going to do that is we're going to move through what we heard in each of the different districts. So to just give folks a refresher, our naming of the districts, we have 3 of them: Historic City Hall District, Cultural Heritage District in the middle, and then the Pond, we called it the Pond Redevelopment District. There was, I'll say off the bat, some initial feedback to change that potentially to the Pond District, and we may well do that in the final vision plan. So starting in the Historic City Hall District, this is just a screen grab of what we included as the planning framework in the vision plan that sort of showed some of the things that are happening or potentially happening in this area, as well as opportunities and constraints in this district. And the vision plan sort of laid out different options for and precedents for what could happen in this area that we were asking for people's feedback on. So when we asked in this district, does the identity and character statement and land use focus that we included in the vision sort of align with their vision for the district? The majority of people said yes, and some others said mostly. With this question, of course, there's always going to be ways that people interpret this. So, I think, we're not putting everything into these results, but it is nice to see that we are, our vision plan does, for the most part, reflect what people were thinking for this district. More specifically, what we heard pretty overwhelmingly, both in person and virtually through the survey, was really just an excitement that something could happen in this area. When we sort of asked a little bit deeper what that meant for people, they saw particularly the Historic City Hall District as being an opportunity to create sort of an iconic destination, somewhere that could be create a heart and an identity for West Linn, as well as being probably the most logical place to create economic development opportunity and really be the link between the West Linn neighbourhoods, including Willamette and Bolton and Robinwood, as well as a connection across the river to downtown Oregon City and to the new Tumwater Village. So they saw it really as that sort of critical hub that connects all those things together and sort of that link in the chain. In terms of land use, we heard pretty strongly that this was an opportunity to create a central and public gathering space, and that could look a variety of different ways. But that things should be walkable with a strong sense of urban design, and a preference for commercial uses such as restaurants and shops and local businesses that could also be tied in with mixed use development. And as I said before, this was sort of seen as probably the most logical place to have higher densities in the waterfront as a whole. People were definitely excited about the opportunity to connect to the river, both with direct access opportunity, as well as just creating more opportunities to view the falls and the river. Heard a lot of comments about creating a river trail, and that wasn't just in this district, but throughout the length of the site and beyond, to connect the waterfront to other parts of the region. And while it wasn't everyone's first preference, there was certainly a lot of comments left, and I think also some good survey results that showed that a way to connect directly would be to enhance the fishing dock and potentially create opportunities for watercraft moorings, so people could sort of park their boat or their craft, and then come up to something like a commercial district in the historic City Hall, or create opportunities to just get in the water in those places. And just celebrating the natural beauty in general was a common theme. So when we asked, this is a very quick and very high-level summary of what types of land uses people had preference for. We heard this sort of gathering space idea that sort of materialized in the central public square, but I don't think it has to be exclusively like that. That was one of the options that we presented and probably the most popular option. As I said, street-facing cafe and retail was a high sort of prevalent land use that people wanted to see in this area. That probably goes along with structured parking, just because there's not a lot of space up here, and probably a better use of space to provide other land uses rather than parking. And the housing types, there's townhomes, but also lower, I'd say lower story residential opportunities there. So people didn't want to see like really massive towers, but saw this as a place to create potentially some mixed use development opportunity, with some residential included in that. Some of the big concerns, I don't think a surprise to anyone on this call. Most of the concerns in this area came down to traffic and parking, and especially with intensified development, how would that traffic and parking be accommodated by the site? I think also just an interest and concern about environmental sensitivity of like over programming this area, and that also it has significant constraints like the topography, and those sorts of things. Maintaining truck access and parking, particularly for the uses, the current uses on the island, was obviously seen as important to make sure that those things can align with whatever we do in this district. And then there was some level of comment around not wanting to change the area, or that there was a concern that we were just creating like a sameness to other areas in the metro region. So there was some comments that reflected those those concerns as well.
Adrian, what does that mean? Sameness with other. Do you have any sense? I mean, I realize that seems. I don't know what that.
Yeah. I think it's referring to, hey, we're seeing these sorts of mixed use developments, and we're seeing these certain businesses and commercial areas come into other places, and we don't necessarily want to be just the same as everywhere else. But I'm not 100% sure specifically what that is, but that's the general sense I got from just reading through the comments and from what we heard at the in-person engagement that I was attending, at least. John, I don't know if you heard the same thing and had any other comments on that. And you might be muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, I wouldn't describe it in any other way. It just, I think people, they want the area to be distinct. So essentially.
It might be a good place for us to pause and just ask if there's any other questions or comments on this district before we move on to others.
This is Jeff Cohn. I had, I guess, a question or a comment. So the issue that I raised about drawing conclusions from the table, if you go back one slide to slide 22, and you talk about housing types, townhomes, and I know you don't have the data right here, the table, but if you compare the row for townhomes and the row for low-rise apartments, that's a perfect case that I think we should just hold in our minds and maybe refer to later when you're talking about some sort of methodology for ranking. But townhomes, one of those, townhomes versus apartments, one of them had maybe more first choices, but also a lot more third choices. And others may have a lesser amount of first choices, but actually quite a number of second choices. So, it's sort of polarizing. Some of the choices may be polarized, and how the numbers get, played with till you spit out a number at the end has to be carefully thought through, so that when we say that this is better than this, what do we really mean by that?
Yeah, I was going to hold fire until the end of the meeting, but it might be worth just very quickly going through an example. I did sort of crunch your numbers a little bit here to sort of show that. So I'm just going to share my screen and go through this hopefully fairly quickly. I know this is a lot of data on a small screen. But the top table here is what Jeff's referring to, which is what was presented in the memo that was sent around summarizing community engagement results. We had percentages in here, but I've just taken those out for the time being. I think where some of the confusion came in was that we had this labeled as the total over here, and this is really the number of responses that we got back on each of those. So some people didn't respond to every category. So one, that was a source of confusion. And then second, to Jeff's point, there are, if we take housing as the example, that while there was some high support for townhomes as a first preference, there was also, they were also ranked as third when others preferred other types. So what we're going to move towards, and thank you, Jeff, for this suggestion, is moving towards a scored value. So if people ranked at 1, they get 4 points for that score, and then it goes down 3, 2, 1 based on the preferences. And what that gives us is a total points that we then normalize by the number of responses that were received. What this essentially does in a nutshell is it starts to give us a sense of what's the spread between preference between those different uses. So if we take housing types, for example, 2 things happen here. One is, as Jeff just mentioned, low-rise apartments come higher to the top because there is like 1, 2, 3 is the highest for that type of use. Townhomes are a little bit under that, and then mid-rise apartments a fair bit lower. And you can see the percentage. If the top choice is 100, there's 94% are also kind of supportive of townhomes. There's a drop off to mid-rise apartments being like 87 as an example. So we'll update the memo to sort of reflect that change, and it's mostly in the housing types where that sort of what we had said in the memo and what we're showing in this presentation doesn't quite match. Most of the other things are still in the same order as we had presented, but Jeff, really appreciate that.
You're
So,
welcome.
does that sort of clarify for you and potentially for others on that point?
Yes, it does. I think one other thing that we can't judge from those numbers is if you said, well, Parks got a score of 320 and low-rise apartments got a score of 250. You can't compare one cluster, the best of one cluster, to the best of another cluster, because what they're being ranked against are different opponents, right?
Yes. Yes.
And at first I was looking at that table going, oh, I wonder if they can be compared to one another, but I think that's really stretching the truth. So I think just within each, things being ranked against each other, those numbers make sense, but then otherwise you can't read into them any further.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
But anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. And the good news is that was one data source, and the other data sources were anecdotal information or stuff we heard from both in-person outreach and the survey commentary. So it's really nice to be able to put these things together. I'll go back to the presentation. If there's any other questions about this district. Yeah.
Actually, Adrian, now might be a good time just to introduce a few people that have shown up since we got started. So I know Kathy Hallecky is present. I think she's having problems with her mic, and Greg Smith is watching, and we're currently working with him behind the scenes to get him into the meeting. But also, former Governor Kate Brown is also present as well. And you may want to say a few words and introduce yourself, if I can put you on the spot. So.
Good afternoon. Sorry I was a few minutes late, had technical difficulties. Delighted to be part of this process. Kate Brown, the new president of the Willamette Falls Trust. And I am so excited to see this, because I think the work we are hoping to do is very much in alignment with this vision. I do have a question. Is it possible to get a electronic version of this presentation, or is it too early yet?
No, we can certainly share that. And John, we can just circulate that after the meeting, perhaps.
Perfect. Absolutely. Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you. And you can reach me, Andrew. Andrew was Andrew at WillametteFallsTrust.org, and I'm Kate at WillametteFallsTrust.org. So look forward to hearing from you, and look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Good to keep going, John?
I guess by all means, thank you. Yes.
All right, no problem. Yep. All right, I'll share the screen again. Let's move into, that's a good segue. Let's move into the Cultural Heritage District. So you're seeing on the screen what we included as the planning framework in the vision plan. So what we heard in this area, again, pretty good support for what we had shown in the vision plan. So that that trend's similar to the previous district. What we heard here is that, again, there was this real excitement for creating access to this area. I think it's quite a few of the comments that sort of said, we've lived here for a long time and haven't been able to access the area and the falls and the river. So there was a general excitement towards being able to get more access, and also unlocking and celebrating the area's natural assets. Again, seen as sort of another opportunity to create an iconic destination, and a really large sort of support for the Intertribal Public Access Project, and acknowledging the site for its tribal and cultural significance. So that came through in the survey and in the in-person comments. And then there was also just a general recognition that there's also a very strong industrial heritage on the island, and as things might, and if things change in terms of the use of the island, that there would be an interest in the reuse of those buildings. Again, access was a big deal here, particularly getting direct access to view the falls and to access the river through trails and other things. A large sort of swing of comments around creating interpretive and educational opportunities, and that was both around the natural parts of the site, but also the industrial and tribal parts of the site as well. And then for the land uses, yeah, I mentioned the first two. This area in particular is very reliant on public property, on private property interests. In terms of what we heard for interest in uses and how those spaces might be reused, a couple of times we heard similarities being drawn to Vancouver, Granville Island in Vancouver, BC. In particular, if you've been to Granville Island, it has like a concrete batching plant working right next to a public market that's also got a lot of sort of light industrial and maker spaces operating all in sort of concert in one place. Obviously, it's a different topography, it's a different place, but there were definitely some comparisons drawn to those types of uses and to that particular case study. So I think people saw the potential industrial reuse as opportunities to recreate something similar on the island itself. I think overall there was mostly in this area of focus on Moores Island. There wasn't necessarily, I don't think, a strong recognition that there's potentially also an uplands and a lowlands area in this zone. So I don't think we got a lot of commentary around what could happen up sort of at the Willamette Falls Drive level of the site, if anything. So I think people were mostly focused on the island and the river. In terms of the things that we heard, the specific types of uses, we heard, trails with viewing platforms to the river and the falls being of high priority, having cultural spaces that really celebrated tribal and indigenous heritage of the area. Again, that same comment around the housing is applicable in this area where it's we're slightly off with our townhomes, but again, that sort of lower intensity residential. I think less people were interested in residential here, and a lot of people recognize that, this at least the lower section here is, potentially it's in a flood zone. And it would need to be very resilient to those sort of the flooding of the river and so forth. Big concerns for this area were, over programming, just given the constraints of the area, traffic and access being challenging to this site because of the topography and also just a recognition of, needing to be flood resilient with whatever we do here. I included in these slides and this is also in the memo, just a few, these are just a couple of extracts of the types of comments that we heard in each district. So, you can sort of see the tone. And we tried to include a range of comments here around people that were very positive to sort of, medium interest or differing opinion, and then people that were concerned about certain things or had maybe a different or negative reaction to what we were showing. Any questions or comments on this district before we move to the last one?
This is
sorry. Go.
This is Pat Hogan. Hey, I just wanted to go back because townhomes have been mentioned a couple of times here. And John, in the presentation you did over at Bolton, there was a discussion about affordable housing. Would these be considered affordable housing?
So I think in terms of that, I mean, any type of housing can be, quote, affordable. It just kind of depends on how you on how they're sort of programmed in terms of why they're built, how they're financed, things like that. So I mean, they are typically more affordable than single family. So, but I think in our presentation, we talked about both the waterfront and also a little bit about House Bill 2001. But I think townhouses are a more affordable ownership style of housing, generally speaking. Yeah.
Because it seemed like there was a discussion about the businesses or employment that's created through this development, that the people who work there, we wanted them to have an opportunity to live in West Linn, and that would, in many cases, necessitate us to have affordable housing available.
So I think from a broader standpoint at this, I think generally people want to live in the communities where they work. I think the waterfront project is not necessarily planning for affordable housing per se necessarily. And so I think the survey, Adrian, correct me if I'm wrong, was more about housing types and not about affordability necessarily in terms of these things. I mean, it's a very important topic, but I think this project is not trying to tackle that necessarily, but the project could potentially create new areas for housing in the city. So some of which could be affordable. So.
And I think, John, you kind of hit the nail on the head with sort of a nod to the fact that there are ways to make that housing, potentially more affordable if that's, a priority for this area. So, at this stage, we kind of want to know what type of housing folks would want to see in this area. And then the vision plan may go into, a little bit of detail around, while we haven't specifically identified affordable housing as the use specifically, there are ways to create that if that's a priority for the community. Thanks for your question, Pat.
Yeah.
Any other questions in this district? Okay, I'll move on to.
Sorry, Adrian, I was trying to. I have my hand raised. I was trying to, but Andrew Mason and the comment that I have is kind of a question, but it's funny. It attaches a little bit to the sameness comment in the last district, which is noting the let's not be the same in the other one, and then the comments of being iconic here, and the quotation on just the last thing up of amazing historical and natural resources of the site. I mean, all of those kind of go of a piece. I think, which I think it's important to note, and it requires then some really particular attention to being able to elevate, call attention to, create the destination of the iconic spot that's tricky when you add the access concerns to it. It's just that, but I think that's important because we had said a lot of things of gosh, the ultimate failure of this is if you end up putting an IHOP up there. Not that I have any objection to pancakes, but that this Willamette Falls is a one of a kind, and so how do you create a district, a zone, supporting infrastructure that really do call attention to its real uniqueness, that also don't make it into a circus like Niagara Falls.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks for that comment, Andrew. Okay, I'm gonna move on and feel free.
Hold on just a second. It's Kathy Halicki.
Sorry, I can't see hands. My apologies. I can't see hands on the screen.
I don't know
Sorry,
if this is where to address this, but because I did see the marinas in the picture, I'll do it now. Boat docks and marinas could present a rather large problem with the sea lions. We already have that issue, and the Department of Fish and Game have to come out and shoot the sea lions around the locks at certain times during the year, and around the falls and the locks. And it has to do with the salmon and the salmon habitat. Also, if you have these marinas and docks, then that's going to promote the sea lions to come lay on them, which means destruction of the ones you just built. And then there's a lot of noise. If you're having housing, there'll be a lot of noise just from the sea lions themselves, and that will be detrimental to the livability of around there. So just food for thought, that's all.
That's great. Good comments. Thank you, Kathy. Any other hands that I'm missing? I apologize. I Can't see on this screen. Okay, feel free to, if we have other questions that come up in this district, we can come back to them. I will move on to the Ponds district. So this is our sort of final district. So what we heard here, again, take this with a grain of salt because we presented a lot of things in the vision. But we did hear back that there was a good alignment with what we're presenting in the vision. When we dive into that more specifically, there was definitely very strong support in the comments that we received and the responses to the survey that that this area should be sort of retained or enhanced as a natural area. And that included things such as wetlands restoration, conversion to open space, or in promotion of open space, I should say, trails and access to the river, and definitely a more lower intensity development scale in this area. Included in that was a lot of interest in enhancing access to the river. I know, Kathy, to your point, the docks, the question about the docks, there was definitely interest in opportunities for, having somewhere to put in for paddling, particularly non-motorized craft. We heard a lot more interest in that. Not necessarily motorized craft, although there was some interest in sort of a more, there was less interest in a full-scale marina, but potentially some interest in like fishing sort of boat access, but more so non-motorized craft and swimming access to the river. There was generally in this area pushback against hotels, sports fields specifically, although there was some support still for like community-oriented facilities, but not necessarily sports fields, and on large-scale residential development. Just to give a snapshot of that, these are some precedent images that we included in the vision plan and in the survey. What rose to the fore in the survey was wetland trails with viewing platforms, potentially having something to interpret that with maybe a visitor or a nature centre. Housing types where it was supported was more on the sort of lower scale, sort of single family end of the spectrum, and creating smaller opportunities, like limiting traffic, but smaller opportunities to park for those uses that are being created. To that end, some of the critical concerns in this area was obviously, whatever we do, the impact of more intensive development on natural areas, wetlands, and wildlife habitat. A lot of concern around traffic and parking increases in that area, and not really having a street network that can support that. And then I think there was also just a recognition of the potential cost of environmental remediation, particularly of the ponds, and that whatever we do down there has to have some level of flood resilience, given its sort of low-lying topography. Some of the a selection of the comments that we heard, as you can see, are related a lot towards access to the river, natural and open space, and then concerns around traffic and streets, those sorts of things. Any questions or comments on this particular district? And I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
I believe Council President Baumgartner has her hand up.
Great, thank you, John.
Thank you, John, and thank you so much, Andrew, for the information. I'm really interested in Adrian, sorry. I'm really interested in especially the questions around branding and identity for this waterfront area. And I'm hearing a lot from people about interest in paddle, especially non-powered boats, and the potential for expanding resources and infrastructure to accommodate paddlers, especially after the locks reopen, and how Westland could be an important destination on the Willamette Water Trail. So I'm interested to hear what other people think about that when we get to the point to discuss it, because that's the interest I've been hearing, which would naturally, I think, cater to the interest to keep especially the pond area, in a more kind of wilder habitat sort of an area. It could be well accommodated with paddling and kind of a lower impact activity than like that. Thank you. And I do have to jump off in a minute, so apologies to everyone for leaving the meeting.
No problem. And just to double down on that, I think at the in-person open house, and John, you might be able to talk a little bit more about whether you were hearing the same thing. There was definitely an excitement about the locks reopening and also the opportunity that creates for up and down river access, particularly for paddling. There was lots of people who were like, "Oh, I'd love to be able to paddle up there now," or what have you. So I think that interest is something we heard as well.
Yes, I'm actually going to the Locks Authority meeting at 2. That's why I'm needing to leave. So thank you.
So,
So this is Jeff. I'm an active paddler myself. I've kayaked a lot on the Willamette, and just to kind of add a little bit more to that is that most of the paddling that I do and most other people that I see, they start at Willamette Park and they go upstream because that's where it's most interesting. They go upstream through this thing called the Narrows, and there's little islands and stuff. Between Willamette Park and the falls and the locks is kind of a boring stretch, I'll be honest. Coming up from below the Willamette Falls under the Arch Bridge, that's a very interesting area.
Right.
So with locks open, that sort of turns that kind of boring area into a potentially more interesting area because it now has the locks and it kind of connects the exciting below the falls to the above the falls. If the locks were not an issue and if there were no locks there, the stretch between the falls and Willamette Park seemed not terribly enticing. And in fact, I mean, you're attracting people to get close to the falls, and the falls, you don't want to be too close to the falls. So I always struggle a little bit with what is the right level of attraction to get people to want to paddle there, but not put them in any kind of harm's way, you know? And so I don't know, just, but I think the locks is a key part in making that stretch of river more accessible and desirable.
So I just received an email from Greg Smith, 2 emails from Greg Smith. He's unable to join the meeting, but he's watching remotely. So he did ask me to pose a couple of comments or questions to the group. So I just wanted to put this out there. A little unconventional, but virtual meeting etiquette is still sort of evolving. So his first question was if there's any possibility of approaching the state about turning the ponds area into a state park like Shampooey, that could be a station on the Willamette River Trail as a stop between Salem and Portland. And then dovetailing with that, pursue federal grants for cleanup of the Blue Heron Pond as well. So I think my initial comment, is just that, the city doesn't own that area down there, but there is a lot of public interest and support, locally for such an action on that. So obviously it come down to a willing seller necessarily, but I just wanted to put that out there. Adrian, any thoughts or comments about that in terms of how this aligns with the feedback we heard? So.
No, I think that does align with the feedback we heard and exactly what you said. There's obviously, private ownership down there that would need to be, sorted out to make that happen. But I think there was definitely an interest in moving towards that direction.
Yeah, and then the second question was, could you imagine making the property in this area, which I believe was the Cultural Heritage District, into a community land trust as a means for making housing more affordable? Or the question may have been a broader question about the whole planning area, and that's my initial response is that again the city doesn't directly control a lot of the land in this area, but a lot of that does come down to working with partners and also working with any potential zoning changes you know, for where we want housing to be permitted in this area as well. Anyways, Adrian, I'll let you, any other follow up to the idea of a community land trust on that?
I don't have any follow up, but
Yeah.
definitely appreciate the comment, and we'll consider it. I see that Councillor Baumgarten has her hand up.
Thank you. Just really quickly, I just would like to say that, point out to people who may not know this, that the city was approached to purchase the property from Water Environmental Services. And because of the ponds, I wasn't on council at the time, but my understanding is that the cleanup, the potential cost of the cleanup of the Blue Heron Pond specifically, was such a daunting idea that it was deemed not financially reasonable. But I personally would have very strongly advocated for the city taking this property on and then finding funding to clean it up. And if that were to become an opportunity again, I would advocate for that. And saying that, I will bid you adieu.
Thank you, Council President. So. Okay, those are the end of my questions from Greg Smith. So
great. And unless there's other questions, John, I'm happy to turn it back to James to take us to the next agenda item.
All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that presentation. Our next item is number 4, meeting 4 agenda, the tasks.
okay, so the next meeting, basically, it's scheduled for August, and in terms of that, so the next meeting would be to go over the, you know, the final version of the vision plan. In terms of confirming that, we're going to be working over the next couple of months with you know, working on what that looks like in terms of refining the feedback into a more detailed plan, and then next steps going forward in terms of implementation. I think with that, we also wanted to see if the group was okay if we bump that from August to September for a couple of reasons. One is August is a tough time for people vacation, you know, because of vacations and whatnot, and then also just to give us a slightly more time to revise the plans and to give the working group an extra long time to review those documents as well. And so we would just bump it to the first half of September. But that's essentially that's what's coming up then. So any questions about that? And nope. Okay.
I don't have an issue with that. I think being more prepared and having a better meeting in September probably would be good.
Okay, great, thank you. That also gives us a chance also to check in with property owners a few more times as well, and just sort of vet everything and make sure everyone's on board. So, okay.
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 So number 5 is items of general interest from the city staff.
Okay, yeah, so just a couple of things here. I just want to keep everyone appraised of what's going on, since so as the city works on the vision plan and other documents, the waterfront plan generally, you know, changes continue to happen in the planning area, so just want to keep the group up to date on that. So we are receiving, we do have a sort of imminent development application down around the Blue Heron Ponds, probably. This is on the north end of the property along 5th Street, and so there's a residential development proposed down there. We had a pre-application conference a few months ago, and a local group has formed in response called the Friends of Willamette Wetlands, and sort of track this project. And at the city's encouragement, the developer and the Friends group are having a dialogue, as I understand it, about that project. So also, I see that Council Member Groner has joined us. Welcome. So I think in terms of the Historic City Hall District, improvements to Historic City Hall are ongoing, as Britta mentioned earlier, just before the meeting. I was down there this morning to take a look. And across the street from Historic City Hall, there's an empty building at the corner of Willamette Falls Drive and Broadway. That building has a new owner, and they are, we recently had a pre-application conference. That building is going to be, it's had some deferred maintenance, and it's going to be sort of prettied up on the outside and brought up to standard a little bit, and they're going to market that building probably for a restaurant or a brew pub or something like that. And the apartments behind are also in the process of being rehabilitated. So there should be a little more activity happening down there. So if people have questions about that, I can forward you the pre-application notes on that project. And then also recently we met with the technical advisory committee, and we're just sort of tracking what's happening across the river in Oregon City. We understand the Grand Ron is about to come in with their land use application for the redevelopment of the Blue Heron site, and they've also have some bike pedestrian improvements sort of under study on the around the Arch Bridge bridgehead down there in the Main Street area. And I think that's generally it, unless anyone here has specific questions about what's going on. Kathy?
I just wanted to let you all know that the Willamette, just to piggyback on what John was saying about the pre-application on the upper end of this, he will present, Bob Schultz will present to the Willamette Neighborhood Association on July 10th. We have both in person at the Rosemont, at the Westland Adult Community Center on Rosemont Road, and via Zoom, and you're all invited if you're interested. Thank you.
Yeah. And Britta, I see your hand up.
Yes, yeah, thanks, John. I just wanted to throw out with regards to Historic City Hall, the coalition is in the midst of planning our interpretive and visitor center there. We'd love to have as much community feedback on what everybody wants to see at that center. So if you have any feedback or ideas or want to be more involved in that process, please reach out to me. My email is just my name, britta@wfheritage.org. I think most of you have that. Just wanted to let you know we're looking for as much feedback as we can get, so we're happy to hear from anybody.
Thank you, Britta. I think this actually sort of may bleed into our next topic, Chair Manning.
Yes.
About number
So
6.
6 is items of general interest, and thank you, John, for that city reports there. So these are items of general interest from the working group members. Okay, there's no items of general interest. Is there any public comment?
There's a hand up there, James.
Let's see who has.
Hi, Kate Brown. Sorry, I was a little slow on the uptake. I'm still learning the webinar system. I just wanted everyone to know we are co-hosting, the Willamette Falls Trust is co-hosting along with Metro and CRIPFIC, Intertribal Fish Commission, with the Yakima Nation, the Lamprey Festival on July 12th, Friday, starting at, I believe, 10 o'clock at Clackamas Park. All are welcome. We will have boat tours of the falls, and it should be, we're hoping for really great weather, and it should be great fun. So we'd love to have you join us if you're able. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, so if there isn't any other public comments, I see we adjourn at 2:10. Thank you, everybody, for participating today.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your work on this and help.
Thank you.
Thanks all.